is 7:06, and we've completed the tour of the outside of the library, and we've successfully engaged in our recess, although didn't have as much fun on the playground as I would have expected. And now the next item on the agenda is the minutes from September 3rd. Is there a motion?
I move to approve the minutes of September 3rd, 2024, with any necessary modifications.
Is there a second?
Second.
Page 1. Page 2. Page 3. Hearing no modifications, all those in favor of accepting the minutes say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Next, public comment. This is a moment where anybody can make any comment. It doesn't have to be anything that's on the agenda. It can be, but it can be anything at all. So if you can come up, anybody who has a comment, if you can come up, introduce yourselves and speak into the microphone. Yeah, please. Yeah. But don't touch the microphone because they get really mad.
There you go.
Is it on? I guess
Yeah.
it's on.
Yeah.
Good evening. My name is Roseanne Greco. I'm not a resident of Williston, but I'm one of your neighbors. I live in South Burlington. Just for background, I was on the city council in South Burlington for a number of years. I was the chair for 1 year. And in context of this, I served 30 years on active duty in the Air Force and retired as a colonel. The reason I'm here before you is to ask if you would put on a future agenda and consider the resolution or a similar resolution as was passed in Burlington on, I think it was August the 12th, and then by the city of Winooski on September the 3rd, having to do with requesting Vermont's congressional delegation work with the Air Force to get a replacement mission for the F-35. A mission that doesn't cause any harmful noise to any people in our community, and a mission that doesn't cause any economic hardship or negative impact. You probably received the resolution because part of the Burlington one was to share it with the communities around the airport, including South Burlington, Williston, Colchester, and Winooski. So I assume you received it. So I'm coming before you since I've been involved a little bit about the F-35, and to urge you to take it up on a future agenda and hopefully discuss it and pass it. You have the resolution from Burlington and Winooski, so you see what's in the clauses and the justification for it. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Terry Zitrich. I'm a resident of Williston. I have two subjects I'd like to bring up. One is I'd like to propose or understand how I can get proposed or considered a ban on two-cycle leaf blowers for much of the same reason. I know many people are working when these things are running, but if you're home and retired like I am, and like many of you might be in in that capacity in the near future. They are very loud. Many of them run at 100 dBs, the worst of them. They run at a very low frequency as well. So much of the hearing protection given to the people typically running those leaf blowers are people lower on the socioeconomic ladder. Their hearing's being impacted. They end up with tinnitus. Tinnitus, I think it is. And if I didn't pronounce it right, I'm sorry. But so the hearing protection is inadequate. Plus, they spew out incredible amounts of pollutants. So as we're spending money in the town, improving our charging stations or adding charging stations, promoting clean energy, here we have a product that has no place in today's society. This product uses a two-cycle motor. This is an antiquated piece of technology that only burns 2/3 of the fuel put into it, and it also burns oil. And it spews out benzene, formaldehyde, and VOCs one of the largest contributors to ozone depletion and pollutant. And according to the California Air Resources Board, 1 hour of one of these commercial leaf blowers creates as much pollution as driving an automobile 1,100 miles. So if you have somebody, blowing your, leaf blowing your yard or using one of these blowers to blow off the grass off your sidewalk in 2 minutes instead of taking 5 minutes with a broom, and you just bought an electric car, they just took away the benefit of that electric car. So very bad for the environment. 50 major cities across the United States, including our own Burlington, have banned this technology. So, and California has a major ban, although I don't think they've totally banned the use of them, but they have some kind of maybe it's a sales ban, and they're pushing companies to offer greener solutions. They do exist, and they do pay back very fast. My understanding is people say they're expensive, but they pay back in about 10.5 months. I have some information here, I'll leave it with Eric, where many studies have been done to promote and support the bans that have been put in place. I know it would be unpopular with some people, but it's an incredible noise nuisance, similar to having the F-35s, but consider having the F-35 sit over your house for half an hour, which we frequently have in our neighborhood because quite a few people are getting quite a deal on lawn maintenance, and they use the biggest and baddest of the leaf blowers. So the second thing I'd like to bring up is another public safety item, and that is, I do a lot of cycling. Now that I'm retired, I have a lot of time. I've put in about 1,500 miles of bicycling this year, and the 2 worst roads, and this is amazing to me, and I don't drive on Route 2 or Route 7. I avoid all high-trafficked roads as best I can based on where I live off of Old Stage. The 2 worst roads that I've ridden on all year are North Williston Road and Mountain View. I mean, by far, the cars just give you no space, and I'm passed closely frequently. I've called the police department, and I have a hard time telling. They may take it seriously. I have a very difficult time understanding or evaluating their response. So I don't want to say that they're not taking it seriously. It's just hard to tell. And I was run off the road just recently, just within the last week in Richmond, by a big building supply truck. Ran right off the road. So that was the first time this year. But I'm hoping we can do something, either some kind of additional signage. Some of the roads in Richmond have some really good signage for sharing the road, giving bike space, or some visible enforcement. I see about the same number of cars after this new law. I guess the new law has been put in place that somehow solidified the suggestions that were previously in place to give cars or give bicyclists or other at-risk users 4 feet of space. Just about nobody gives you 4 feet of space. And I'm not talking about the people that move over and give us 3 feet of space. I'm happy with 3 feet of space. I'm talking about the people who don't move at all. There are many cars who go by us and don't move even the littlest bit. So had a police car go past me in Williston on North Williston Road a couple of weeks ago, and just after it passed me, a box van, and the worst perpetrators, unfortunately, are commercial drivers, as it seems. It's commercial drivers and trucks. For whatever reason, they don't like cyclists. But the police car passed me, and not 100 yards later, a black box van passed me very close. And that's how hard it is. I know it's hard to enforce. So I know it's not a simple thing for the police to do, but somehow we have to find a way to keep, hopefully from not killing cyclists. So, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? Seeing none. Eric, is there anybody online?
Nope, no one online with public comment.
Next, State of Vermont Wastewater Pretreatment Grant Acceptance. Eric, if you could introduce that.
Yep, so the next is a series of 3 items here. First is a grant award, and I talked to the board about this earlier in the year, and there's just been some work done with the state to get the grant in order our attorney feels for us to accept it. So you might recall we applied for and were awarded the state wastewater pretreatment grant to pass through to the Burlington Beer Company in the amount of $850,000. This is the largest grant awarded from a pool of $3.3 million. These are state level ARPA funds. The town attorneys reviewed the grant language, consulted with the state of Vermont, back and forth for a few months here. We've arrived at language in the agreement that's recommended for acceptance. There's a motion suggested. There's a couple additional items to make all the functionality of this occur afterwards.
Questions for Eric?
You want a motion first?
What's that?
You want a motion first?
Sure.
I move to approve a sub-grant agreement with the Burlington Beer Company and authorize the town manager to sign all required documentation.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's the state of Vermont wastewater pretreatment.
Yeah, you skipped.
It's the
You
first,
skipped
number
one.
6.
Oh, sorry.
Yep.
Move to accept the state of Vermont wastewater pretreatment grant award and authorize the town manager to sign all required documentation. Thank you, Chris.
Now
That's why
is-
I let you do these usually.
Now is
Second
there,
it again.
is there a second?
He just seconded it again for me.
Who did?
I did.
Harry.
He
Oh,
re-seconded for me.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Now is there discussion?
We've been through this a few times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see the parties agree that the deadline has been extended. Is that something that's necessary?
Yep, that's actually going to be 2 items down. It's not with a grant agreement, but it's a settlement agreement that will be amended as part of your agenda. So this is the first item to look at, and then that'll be the third item.
Okay, I apologize.
We're a mess over here. It's that walk around the green that I'll mess with. Too much fresh air.
So, all those in favor of the,
Aye.
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 no hearing, no nays, the ayes have it. Next, the sub-grant agreement. Is there a motion?
Move
Yeah.
to approve the sub-grant agreement with the Burlington Beer Company and authorize the town manager to sign all required documentation.
Okay, is there a second? And we'll,
Second.
Eric, can you, as part of our discussion, can you,
Yeah.
Yeah, this sub-grant agreement, so the town is the recipient of the grant, so then we need to sub-grant it out to our grantee, which would be the Burlington Beer Company.
Again, for anyone online, we've seen this a few times at this point, so
yeah.
it's not that we don't care, it's that we've asked all our questions already, except for mine.
So hearing no further discussion, all those in favor say aye.
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 The ayes have it. Next,
So the third item, the town entered into a settlement agreement with Burlington Beer Company in July 2023 to address pretreatment of wastewater, among other items. Agreement had a deadline of July 1, 2024 for the pretreatment system to be installed. Now the town's accepted the grant agreement, entered into the sub-grant agreement. It's suggested that the settlement agreement also be amended because we had a date to have this in place of this last July. It took a little time to get the grant monies, get this in order. So then we would look to extend the settlement agreement dates to November 1st, 2025 to install the pretreatment system. And then to submit the pretreatment permit to ANR, update that to April 1st, 2025, and February 1st, 2024. In all these, Burlington Beer is in favor and agreement. Owners here as well, Joe Lunda. If you have questions for him as you wrap up this process as well.
well, first questions for Eric.
So the agreement is necessary to change the date to make the proper installation of the system needed?
Yeah, that was our thought. We had July 1st, but we were in the process of trying to see if these grant monies could be received, and then they're going to use a good amount of the grant monies for this project. So we didn't have the money in hand. The original deadline was in place. So we found a date that kind of landed a little bit further, so there's an opportunity to now have the project occur using the grant.
So look, the original date was gonna be a year out from the agreement signing, and now we're basically putting a little bit more than a year out from the
Yeah,
agreement signing.
about a year and a half or so.
You want to make a statement at all, or a?
I just wanted to, Joe Levina, owner, founder of Burlington Burlington Beer Company. I just wanted to thank the board, thank Eric, thank everyone involved with the town of Williston that got this ARPA grant approval to the finish line.
Any questions for anybody? There is a proposed motion.
Can I do
Yeah,
number,
it's clean sweep here.
number 8, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Move to authorize the town manager to enter into an amended settlement agreement with Burlington Beer Company.
Second.
Is there further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Motion carries. So, thank you.
Look at those signs soon.
So that would bring us up to and back to the library renovation.
I can kick things off if you'd like to.
Yeah, please do.
So we had a walk outside first, and now we're going to get into some more details, but I just want to set the stage for everyone here and those watching at home this evening or in the future. So last winter, the Select Board approved the use of the town's American Rescue Plan Act funds to continue work on our community spaces project with a schematic design of a renovated and expanded Dorothy Allen Memorial Library. Project architect Black River Design has been working on the design in conjunction with a group of community members serving, appointed by the Library Board of Trustees. This steering committee for the schematic design includes members of the library trustees, the Friends of the Library, and the Historical Society. I've attended those meetings along with our library director and assistant director. The work of the committee has been a progressive approach. It's working from the site plan to the interior to determining the exact features of this possible design work for the library. I want everyone to be clear, though, the design work's not finished. This is intended to be a check-in with the Select Board. The library trustees were updated last night, and for the community to see this plan as it's been taking shape by the committee. Certainly, all the committee meetings are also public meetings. If folks want to stay engaged with those as this process continues. It's brought with it, this process, a renewed focus on the town green space and thinking about what a renovated and expanded green means to the public space and how that building would interact with the green. So the presentation tonight by Black River Design, it's a vision of an enhanced town green working to incorporate new elements and rework elements as part of a possible scope for this overall library project. It shows how to possibly reactivate and energize the middle section of the green as another section would be used for the addition and rework parking, and this was highlighted on the walkabout just a little while ago. An overall goal here tonight is to receive an update on the design work where it stands now, share feedback. What's being presented is not a final version of this project, though. The final draft and overall project cost estimates plan to be shared later this year. We have to finish up the design elements before those final cost estimates are put together. The next step from there would be deciding on the final scope of the project and then thinking about the funding aspect. We're launching the capital campaign feasibility study coming up as well, and for the Select Board to think about this project and the board wants to move it forward and what that looks like and what those timelines look like. So that's a discussion pending for the board later this year, but the goal tonight is to check in and see where the project is, get your feedback, get the public feedback, and this is very much a continued process. The committee's been doing really good work, really thoughtful discussion on it throughout the summer. And I thought I might just turn to Carla Carsons for a moment. She's on the Library Board of Trustees, and she is chairing the schematic design committee just to address the Select Board this evening.
Hello. As Eric mentioned, I'm Carla Karstens, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about the committee and our work with John and his team. And I'd like to mention the fact that we've had 5 or 6 meetings, and at each time we've been kind of given an important decision to make about the potential site plan. And early on, it became kind of clear that it was more than just the library, that including the whole green as part of this would be kind of the way to go. I will say that at every step, John and his team is very open to feedback. And so often what he would do is he would present 2 or 3 options. The committee would talk about the pros and cons. What if we tweak this? What if we tweak that? Okay. And then we generally came up with a consensus, and then John and his team would come back, kind of take our feedback, and come up with something, and then we'd look at that. So it's been a step-by-step process, and at each step of the way, the committee has really come to a consensus about, agreed with all of the steps moving forward. And so, in looking at all of the plans that you're going to see today, acknowledge and appreciate the fact that this is not the final step, and that John is very open to feedback, and that there are a lot of concerns about the green specifically that we have taken into consideration as much as possible, especially with Barbara talking about the history of the library expansion and the history of the potential conflict with the green space. That's something also that we've been thinking about. And ultimately, the idea here would be that there would be two positives. The library would have a beautiful expansion that would make it even more of a community space for people to use and enjoy and just come together. And also that the same thing would happen for the community green also, that it would become a space that is really useful to everyone. So hopefully that will open the door.
Carla, could you come back? I have a question. So when we're seeing the concept, I'm hearing that you're saying the committee has been through a lot of these things and given their feedback already.
Yes.
So
yes.
There's nothing here that John or his team's going to show that you guys haven't seen before, as far as you know.
Oh, correct. Yeah, we've all seen it before. So okay.
You just wait for me to say, wait.
So I'm John Hemmelgarn, Black River Design, Montpelier, Vermont.
I'm Lucy Thayer, landscape architect with Trudell Consulting Engineers.
So I wanted to start with just a little bit of a walkthrough of the building itself. I know that we really are going to be focused a lot on the site plan tonight, but I wanted to update you on where we're at. Heather I should introduce Heather Mooney as well from Black River Design, who's running the controls on the video, on the images on the screen. I'm not seeing a cursor. Is it? Can you point while I speak, or is that possible? No. No. So the existing historical society is the little rectangle at the bottom of the screen, and so that is the face of the building that faces Williston Road, Route 2. And the current main entrance is on the right, right there. And generally where the yellow is are the two wings that go back to the left is the children's room, and then on the right is the adult collection. So everything you see at the top of the screen is the addition. It's a two-story addition. With the parking and the addition that we described out on site tonight, you can see that the land drops down there. So this addition is about a half of a floor lower than the existing floor plate of the existing library, which means you're going to come into the kind of the rose-colored area from the parking lot at the top of the screen into a main lobby with a circulation desk to the left. And to the right is the event rooms or the community rooms for a lot of the library programming, and it's also envisioned that that would be available to the general public as well. There's a small kitchen in there, storage room for all the tables and chairs, access to the lobby where there's a restroom as well. So that would be kind of the public space. The green areas you see on the left is this new staff space behind the desk, back of house. The other main feature that you see here is that yellow hallway just to the south of the addition, which is what I was talking about, kind of intruding a little bit on the courtyard. And that is a connector at the upper level, so that if you come in the front door and go up that half a set of steps or up the elevator, you can take an immediate right and go down the hallway and get, it's essentially a shortcut to the children's area without having to kind of circulate all the way through the entire building. It then puts, it's another nice way to experience the courtyard from that space as well. I guess the next, so all the space on the left is the children's areas. On the right is the new collections and the young adults, and The little purple square, lavender square there is a STEAM room. Not what you think, perhaps. STEAM is science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. It's, you may have heard it described as a maker space in some places, but there'll be some equipment in there. People can go in there and actually build things and make things. So what's missing on this plan, of course, then is the entire adult collection, which if we go to the next sheet, is what takes up the upper level of the addition. The idea being that this is still, it's down a half a level to start with. It comes up a half a level, but there'll be a sloped roof in there. It'll feel nice and cozy like the rest of the library that everyone likes. You'll see an image later with some dormers in there. We've been trying hard to keep the height of the building down to approximately what's there already. So that's a quick tour of the building itself. This has been worked through with the committee, with the staff. We have enough space in here for all the books that we need. We haven't really finalized any of the layouts, but we have enough desks and workspace for the staff as well. So if we go on from here, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Yeah, so we just wanted to start by looking at a plan view, a bird's eye perspective of the existing conditions that we just walked. You can see the access road on the right-hand side, the east side of the site of the library, with the kind of angled parking, and it's a little haphazard. The path that essentially kind of bisects the green right now, and the space to the west that is used selectively from what our discussion were on site. And also you can see from this, the number of trees that are on here. We talked about the trees that are gonna leave, but we also just wanna emphasize that we're trying to keep all the trees we can, and that there are a good number that are outside of the area where we're proposing to have the expansion. So here is our proposed design. What we are proposing to do, this is really hard for me to talk away from my plan and not point at it, thanks. But what we're proposing to do, thanks Heather, that's great. And I've got my little version here, but I'll start with the entrance. So it's about, I kind of paced it off when we were out there, it's about 25 feet wide. We're proposing to scale it down a little bit. It also, I think it's generally, it gets wider. The existing one gets wider. It's kind of bows out. And we're proposing to trim it down to 18 or 20 feet, which is more than adequate for single lane traffic, and it actually gives some buffer room for folks to get around a bus or emergency vehicles if needed. But what we are proposing to do here is essentially kind of give a more appealing and green entrance to the library space. So we talked about that cottonwood, the poplar that would come out. What we gain by removing the parking that is currently angled and creates something of a conflict with folks backing out into traffic is we gain this green belt that we can plant. It refocuses on the school and the library. The way the massing of the building has been designed, and we looked at a lot of different ways for the building massing to be on this site in harmony with the existing building, is by having this section that sticks out to the east. You're able to see the new addition by removing that poplar tree. You've got that clear line of vision, you've got a green belt, and we've also widened the sidewalk, so you've got a much more welcoming and pedestrian, multimodal, friendly access to the school entrance. We have a couple of plaza spaces on this east side that by removing that poplar tree, we're able to create kind of a nook, a little kind of small little interior space at the existing entrance. And then we also can create a lower plaza space that could be used for activities or events with some distance from the access road. And then we've proposed a drop-off area for a spot for the bookmobile to occupy and have events. Then we have a kind of a green space in front of the building, and then our proposed access for a new off-street parking area is on the north side of the building. So one of the key features of this was we looked at parking, we looked at access, we looked at safety, and we found that there's a lot of conflicts with cars backing into traffic, and we were looking to not have your first view of the library be a lot of cars parked in front of each other down this entrance, but move them behind the building. So you really focus on the school, you focus on the library, you focus on the outdoor spaces. So by putting it in the back, the idea was safety, visual impact, and also trying to accommodate the spaces that we're losing. So this plan proposes 23 spaces. Currently there's 15 legal spaces and a couple maybe spaces that folks find. If it's too big, we can take spaces out. So this is just a number that we found and kind of settled on to try and accommodate the growing library, but it's certainly a flexible space. We looked at putting this parking in multiple different locations on the site, and I guess as I'm moving around, I want to talk about the green, because you can tell I'm moving around from the entrance, the parking, and as you can tell from this, there's two plaza spaces. There's handicap accessible spaces with a little kind of nook where folks can get picked up, but you can enter from the north and the south side. So we're really trying to make it the front door accessible, visible. Folks with mobility issues can really get there. As we think about the green, I think it's, the way that we know a green, a traditional Vermont green, it's typically rectangular or square. It's typically bordered by roads, parking, or buildings. So those were considerations in the placement. Kind of going back to what I was saying about having the parking be on the other side or a different location on the green. And what I found with the old schoolhouse building is that it doesn't really fit to accommodate parking if we were to lose the parking on the existing access way, which I think is a really valuable change. It cuts into the green in a different way, and you essentially end up with a zigzag or a Z shape or a kind of spread out town green that's no longer your rectangular traditional square. I think we've heard a lot of really good feedback out on site from folks about how the space is used and some of the concerns, and that was really valuable insight. And I recognize that the loss of trees is not ideal in some ways, and I did try to work around some of those trees. I didn't realize that the dedicated tree was there, but I for a long time I tried to work around that, and it was really challenging from a site planning perspective. So those were all things. I just want to make clear that we did think a lot about that piece and how we could avoid that. But ultimately, we thought that this was a really consolidated way to have the site have access to the new addition, utilize the site in a really efficient way, and then within the path system, we got some other great feedback about how the path and the green space is used. But what we're trying to do here is also create an opportunity for folks to experience the green in a different way by not taking away anything that's currently there, but by allowing it to continue to happen and maybe facilitate it in a different way, allowing folks to circulate through the green, maintaining large open space, preserving the gazebo, adding new plantings, and then creating these nodes. So you'll see that we have multiple nodes throughout the site that are intended to anchor the space and connect it together. There is the space on the southwest corner at the intersection of Williston Road. There's a small interior space as you head up to the school. And then we also have these other plaza kind of connecting spaces on the north side of the library and at the current library entrance. So our goal is really to circulate people in and through the green in a way that allows for flexibility preserves that traditional green as well. So, one thing we visioned was that the parking, having this extra parking, I know that there was a discussion about vendors that come and park and set up. The idea is to continue to do that and have a way to facilitate that in a more formal arrangement. Additionally, having the 6 spaces by the schoolhouse would allow that space to potentially be used for meeting space and have a little bit of more access and give it a little more opportunity to be utilized because it's currently underutilized. So I think that that is kind of it for the overview. I could go on, but I'll stop there.
So, and we do invite feedback. We've gotten some great stuff already tonight, and we'll be getting some more, but I wanted to show you just a couple more images here. So again, we really haven't gotten into the details, but we've looked at massing and roof lines for potentially for the additions. This is looking down the walk coming from Williston Road, with the existing building on the left. And we talked about how the building would extend beyond the face of that, so that now there's I call it a pedestrian entrance, but a pedestrian approach to the building that would have a presence and say Dorothy Alling Memorial Library on it, whether it has the letters or not. Everyone would know that that's where you can go into the building. And if you remember from the floor plan, it actually connects right to the lobby, and just inside those doors are those event rooms. So we felt this was, I think, an important view to start to think about. The next one that we have is from the center of the green, looking at the addition on the left. You see how the ground slopes down there, but the roof is still at pretty much the exact same height. And the gable, the pitch on that roof is about the same as what's on the visible gable that's there currently. So I think it's quite compatible and not really kind of sucking up all the attention from the green here. We want that to be the library, the edge of the green more than the face of the library. And then, as I was mentioning while we were on site, as you move up towards the road more and look back at an angle, the trees really start to kind of interrupt that view a little bit. And so the building really does become part of the edge of that open space and not an object itself. Unlike, say, the bandstand, which is definitely an object on the green there. And then the last image that we're showing is the one from the parking lot, which would be the new front of the building. You can see some of the dormers I was talking about earlier on the right. At this point, we're showing a little bit of glass, a little more contemporary look there, with the thought being that this is the view of the building, that if we want it in 20 years, someone to be able to say, yeah, that's the 2025 addition to the library, they'll actually be able to kind of recognize it for that. Still, we want to keep it within the massing and the angles and the lines of the existing building in the right scale. But I think that there's an opportunity there to actually make it a sign of its own time. So those are the images that we've most recently been working with the committee on, and we're in the middle of soliciting feedback on that. And as you can see, we also then have spent a lot of time thinking about the green, and we know that this is an important issue on this project. And we were listening, I think, carefully tonight earlier, and I think open this up. Well, I think we have one more slide to show you.
Yeah, this is just a quick kind of get folks thinking about the 3 dimensions of some of the materials, the look and feel. So the intent is that it's a gathering space, a community space, that it has maintains the same function and hopefully elevates that with these improvements. There would be small interior spaces and materials that would all connect the places together, so it would really feel like one complete place that's connected. So these are just some images to get some ideas out there and get folks thinking about that.
Questions from the board?
I know noticed you left the gazebo and the schoolhouse exactly where they exist now. Was there any talk of shifting them or move? I would, the gazebo staying on the green, I understand that, but, you know, is there a better place for it? And then the schoolhouse, other places have moved schoolhouses from inconvenient locations to someplace else on the property. We have a town village, village park right behind. Was there any thought about moving either of those structures?
There was, I think, some conversation about it. To be honest, we didn't find any compelling reasons to do that. I know that the schoolhouse was moved there relatively recently.
No, so we can move it again then.
If it can be moved once, it can be moved again.
Terry, you didn't go to school there, did you?
No, I did not.
Okay.
Lucy had a great point about kind of what makes the edge of a green, and there's a building that's on it, and it was put there, I think, for a good reason. I suspect there was a fair amount of thought that went into where we wanted to put that. I think where that is seems to be fine. We added a little bit of parking over there to make it perhaps a more useful building on the green. The bandstand or the gazebo is a more difficult one. We had some great input from Kathy at one of our meetings where we found out that they have actually outgrown it. I also learned that it's not nearly as old as I thought. It was here when I arrived in Williston 20 whatever years ago, and so I thought it'd been there forever and ever and ever, but it really hasn't. But it does seem to have become a fixture on the green, and it seems like there is some value to kind of keeping it where it is, unless we could come up with a better spot for it. And if it does, then we're certainly open to that. And with some of the feedback we've gotten tonight, we might want to put that back on the table to see if there is a better way to kind of meet the needs of some of the competing input that we got this evening.
Yeah, that's what I certainly heard on our walk, was that the band was gonna struggle with that, leaving it in that location. It feels like it might be kind of getting lost in this bigger project where it's a beautiful piece of architecture. It should be something, not for architecture, but it's a beautiful structure that should be prominent on the green, not hidden away in a corner.
Right, and so again, that's good feedback, both from you, for anybody that's listening that wants to write a note to the committee of their thoughts about that. But obviously we can get rid of it, and I don't think any of us were really seriously considering that. We can leave it where it is, or we can put it to in a different spot. And I think I think that has some real options there, because it's still there. It's still the same bandstand, and it would be in a new location. It'd probably be a lot easier to move than the schoolhouse was.
Someone mentioned on the field trip there that area just southwest of the bandstand is a wet area. I know in wet years it is a wet area right there during the July 4th. I remember a few times. Maybe some way of having drainage there, or adding some fill.
Yes.
Making it, it's going to be utilized more, that area, than it currently is if we lose green space.
Right. I believe there's a qualified engineer that's listening that may want to comment at this point.
Yeah, Abby Derry from my office maybe on, but I can also speak to the fact that this would be an opportunity. We need to look at the grading and everything and to preserve trees, because we want to make sure to meet all of that. But there is an opportunity to provide some drainage that would potentially reduce the wetness of those areas and make them more usable.
Right. I mean, we've worked with firms or companies that can basically kind of slice the field, put some drainage in, and cover it back up. It's a popular thing to do with ball fields or soccer fields that are very wet, provided that the soils are properly draining there. So,
was there any thought in the design process of some type of senior community room in the library?
Senior community room?
Area? Yes.
Well, the event rooms are multi-purpose for all ages, and I can foresee something like our current book that's very popular with seniors,
so there is a kitchen in the event A, B area there?
Right, right, and the AB is indicating that there would be an operable panel partition potentially in there that would allow you to have two separate, smaller spaces, or open it up as a much larger space. It's well over 1,000 square feet.
What- I was trying to add it up, the square footage in the old library versus the new library, but I never quite got there. What's the square footage in the old library versus the new addition?
9,400.
In the old area?
It was about 16,500.
So a total would be 16.5?
So we're adding about 7,000 square feet to a 9,500 square foot building in round numbers.
9,500 is 16.5.
So, and again, this committee has been a direct offshoot of the previous feasibility committee. And we took then the program that was arrived at through that process and have put it into a little bit more of a specific plan here. And a much, as you can see, a more specific proposal. But it's still being drawn with pretty soft pencils right now.
Other questions from the board?
I heard a lot of sort of aghast at how much space the parking area is gonna take up. Is the 23 spaces derived from something, or is it a guess, or?
So we have 15 spaces existing, so we needed to replace at least that many, in our opinion, to
Yeah.
keep it accessible. The 23 essentially is the amount of space that, so I think from one perspective, double loaded parking makes the most sense. It's the most efficient use of space. What we could do is, if we feel like it's too much, we could certainly take a few spaces off. However, we just calculated the additional square footage that will be incorporated into the building. So I think 23 is not necessarily an unreasonable number. And one thing I've been thinking about with regard to the band and where you folks like to set up is maybe part of that during concerts is a hard surface where folks can set up for the band, and you would be able to hear the conductor and be able to play out in the direction that you're comfortable in. So I've just been trying to take into consideration the comments that you guys have had since we had that meeting, and how the space could potentially be multi-purpose and meet some of the current needs. But the 23 is flexible. It could certainly be reduced if that was determined to be more than necessary.
I'm sure we're not gonna say it's more than necessary, because it's always hard to say, like, well, when you have a big event or a busy day, it is there. But I guess what I was kind of noodling on, and this is just a wondering, I'm not an expert at this, but if the busy times at the library or when school's not in session, there's a parking area right across, just north of your new parking lot, which has got probably 10 spots in there, or 13. You probably should make sure there's a path, by the way, but, you know, could you take that, if you had to lose 4 spots
Right.
to make that fit better, but heavy times in the library, they could use those spots, then maybe.
Absolutely, and so we do have a path. Right now, it's kind of just a little footpath that goes across. I know you're talking about right in the middle, that we didn't formalize. We kind of formalized the safer connections that are.
There might be a swale there too or something, so.
I have walked it, you certainly can get over it, but we were trying to, and I'm sure folks will use it, and if we could add a formal path there, but the intention was to kind of go towards the existing crosswalks. But maybe we should, it's a good place. It's just unsafe, it felt a little unsafe with no pedestrian aisle, but yeah, we certainly could do that. I think the other thinking is that it's the approximate width of the building, so it's kind of what fits within that. And I think that's the maximum we would want to go. We wouldn't want to encroach any further.
Right. Again, we like to do this way, and you need to be able to show you've gone too far to know that you've gone far enough. Yeah, and you know, and then we recognize it, and we're listening. And spoiler alert, parking's gonna be on the next agenda.
There's no problem with the runoff from the parking into that wet area either, correct?
No, yeah, so like John's mentioned, we're definitely in the conceptual phase of, my pen drawing. But part of our next step for the cost analysis is a more thorough, just high-level, stormwater evaluation. But that is something we're looking at in terms of how this fits into the existing stormwater system and the upgrades that will be coming for that during its renovations during the 3-acre upgrades in the future. So that's not an issue to convey it into that stormwater area, but that's certainly on the list of things we're evaluating.
And obviously, it's part of the, as we discussed, it's part of the school parcel, and the school parcel has to resolve the stormwater treatment as a whole. And so because it's a fairly large lot with lots of areas of stormwater treatment, it probably is going to give us a little bit of flexibility on how we approach this, so, which is good.
I remember when I was a kid, I ran through there and it was all muddy one time.
So your mother remembers that too.
We were always dirty.
So, there was significant, I don't know, give and take might be the wrong phrase, but there was good interplay and discussion and ideas being exchanged when we were at our meeting at 6:30. So I don't want to re-till that ground, but if there are topics that came up in this presentation, if there's anybody in the audience who wants to make a brief comment or ask a brief question, this would be a great time to do it. It's, again, it sounds like we're at the conceptual stage, so this isn't the time to where you're gonna have to fight until the last dog dies to make sure you get your idea in. But that being said, the better role would be to get the ideas out there. So if there's any comments or questions, why don't you go ahead?
And if you could use the
Thank you, Ted.
microphone, just so folks from at home can hear.
The library part of it is awesome, and of course I have to speak for the band because it's our band space that's being obliterated. I see the 2 trees there, and I'm wondering where we would even set up. We've already talked about the fact that it's really noisy on that side, but even if we were over there, I don't see a space for the band to really sit. We've got a sidewalk that would be disconnecting us from the bandstand. Now, we don't generally play in the bandstand anymore, but we do sometimes, like in May we will, because we don't generally have enough musicians yet, and we play for Town Fair Day and such, but, and the ground's too wet especially, so it feels a little uncomfortable, like, I feel like we just got pushed out of our space. So.
Okay.
I'm Kathy's husband, but I'm the equipment manager and librarian for the town band. The comment was maybe we could set up in the parking lot. Realize we have to set up at 5:30. The library is open much later than that, so that's a conflict in timing. And of course, we don't have any kind of lights, so we have to deal with the natural lights that we have outside to be able to have our band, because we can't be in the bandstand anymore. And it is a bandstand, it's not a gazebo. So, and this season we've had to be inside Williston Central School, and we take up a full stage for our setup. So when you start looking at the space for us to be set up, it's quite a bit bigger. There's no way we would be able to be between your sidewalks and the bandstand on that front. And I think the biggest factor is the sound. I mean,
That's what I heard tonight.
As people walking around,
Yeah.
when we're in the back green space, it's nice and quiet. You go out to the other side, the cars make so much noise.
It was very apparent.
Very apparent, so,
Thank you.
thank you.
So are we accurately hearing that this area, the open space to the left, is too loud for band?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And just thinking about the side to the left with the parking lot and the, looks like maybe seating area. Just thinking about that, I live right across the street from that. It is very noisy, just like, you know, the issues that the band would have. But also additionally, like cars, parents come out of that parking lot every day, and there was a bus stop that was there, which, you know, restricted their view and their vision. And just thinking about having, you know, if it's shrubbery or trees or what have you there, that will create a roadblock to that piece. And it also seems like that open parking lot, or that open space there by the school, that space is used really well for those larger community events, because right now it is all open. This looks really restrictive and closed. That, as a gentleman said on the tour, that, you know, that the ground already is really hard packed, that trucks get in and out, they're able to set up, we're able to have this beautiful event, but then when it's over, it's just magically returned to this beautiful green open space. I wouldn't envision people sitting there because it is really hot and very noisy. What I do see is people using the sidewalk, and then, you know, venturing out into the open green spot near the library or in the gazebo to visit and to hang out. And if that sidewalk is meandering through, that's going to cut into that open spot. And knowing that those trees there are really old, those root systems, I mean, you would damage those trees as well. Just thinking about that, because I do garden, I've gardened those beds along Route 2 for the past 16 years, and also along the gazebo. And it is a rooty area, and it would be sad to see those old trees be damaged by any additional construction. My preference would be to keep just the straight sidewalk, because then it doesn't take up that green space that is being taken away in other areas.
Thank you. So,
Online comment, Chapin, I'll connect you.
Thanks. Can you hear me all right?
yep. Yes.
First of all, thank you for the presentation, and thank you for the walkthrough earlier. And a lot of good thought has gone into all the plan, and I like a lot of it. I wanted to just raise a couple of things to think about. One is the school use of that green. I do volunteering in Four Winds, and we often do things there. There's a tree lighting and singing activities that happen in the bandstand at Christmas time. And the library uses the bandstand for events and so forth. So just to keep in mind, it's not, we may not have representation right now from the school and some other uses. The location of the parking will also invite people who are attending school events after school to park there. And so that we already have trouble managing that, and I know it'll continue. So that's just a note. Paths. On the paths we're looking at right now, there should be a path to the east and another to the west end of the bandstand, because there's stairs on each end, and it will be used, and it will be a feature. And so it should be included in the path plan. And then another thing about walking is, if you're coming from the west, from the left, as we look at this plan, on the sidewalk going to school, your straight line way to get in is no longer there. If you walk uphill to the top and then walk down the entryway, you could get there. If there were a sidewalk along that western drive to the school, then there would be a more direct route. But I just was thinking people, either they're going to make a path across the grass by going frequently, or something, that we probably should allow for that. For the band, the acoustics is a problem, and I've been trying to think of some possibilities. One is, if there were a band shell with lights and protection from the weather that was backed up to Route 2 on the south side, with some sort of baffles to the side, then the audience could perhaps be distributed to the north from there up to that nodal point in the paths. It's just a thought that maybe something could be done that way. The fact that Route 2 is raised above the level of the green through there makes the sound extra difficult to deal with, and that's why the band has been using this library building as a baffle for our audience to not have the traffic noise be overwhelming. One other comment is if drainage is added, which I believe can be added there, I would do it by elevating, not by digging down because of the roots of the trees. Fortunately, silver maples can handle having the ground raised around them pretty well, better than most trees. But I wouldn't want to see their roots cut if we want to keep the trees. And finally, that existing tree typical shown on the southwest corner of the library is actually an ash, and I think it may be one of the ashes that was not treated because of its location. I don't know, but it's probably one that for other reasons unrelated to this plan might not wind up being there. So thanks for all the good work, and I just want to make sure we allow for how the school also uses this land and try to keep working on the nits of parking and acoustics. Thank you.
I think the band shell thing was kind of what I was thinking when I was thinking about moving the gazebo, though it's a half-formed idea, so. The school has seen this though, right?
Yeah, I've shared it with the superintendent's office.
Okay.
Chapin mentioned some other groups that use the green, or should we invite any other groups in to give feedback? That we asked everyone.
Well, you
that
mentioned the
used it?
school, that's why I asked. Otherwise, it's
Right, I mean, the Four Winds is part of the
Part of
school
the school.
program. Yeah, I'm not sure who runs the tree lighting.
used to be the scouts.
Girl Scouts, yeah.
Yeah, they're gonna do it wherever I'm sorry, the bandstand. I've been saying it wrong for 20 years. I think they would do it wherever the bandstand was.
Yeah, I mean, we have used the word ban shell in the meetings before, but again, we're all very sensitive as well to the overall cost of this project ultimately. So there's the third wheel that's pushing us.
You don't want the angry band fans coming after you though, John.
Yeah.
We try to incorporate everyone into the process, and I think this is, and tonight's meeting is simply part of that process. I think
Sure.
It's been a great opportunity. So I appreciate everything, your time, and I appreciate the comments I've got from folks out back.
Is it, do you have a quick?
Yeah, just a really quick piece, one more thing to consider, if it does come down to the bandstand performing to the left of where our bandstand is, we need access. Right now, we are able to drive our truck up right next to the bandstand because we have no storage of all our percussion equipment, which takes quite a bit. It fills the truck, so that would be a long haul to go even from the parking lot all the way over to the other side of where that sidewalk is.
Okay.
To have to carry it all.
So what is the next step for this?
Well, for this group will be to reconvene with the committee at our next meeting, which is in early October. I'm sure all of this input will be discussed. Lucy and I Heather will be putting our heads together probably before that as well. And we'll move the process forward because we need to. I mean, I can imagine talking to the band again before we're finished.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, the intent this evening, getting feedback from the select board and the community, if there was something that was, really high level of concern for the select board, it's really good time to provide that feedback right now too, as the committee continues its work, and ultimately figuring out what the estimate for this project is and thinking about if the town is that forward.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's So next, budget goal, initial discussions continue, capital funding. Eric?
Yes, the room cleared. But that's okay, it's not as exciting.
Always
as,
does.
I can't understand it.
So I just wanted to continue with the memo I provided you a couple weeks ago. There's a lot to go through in one meeting, so this is just designed to go over the capital points in that memo, just introduce them as some things to think about as we enter the budget process here. Make this bigger, I think. Maybe not. Oh, there we go. There we go. So I took points from my memo just to make it a different way to present the slides. So just resetting our capital budget, that's what manager's office will be working on the next couple months as well. Encompasses our fixed assets that meet a capitalization threshold of at least $10,000. Include building projects, parks projects, our capital equipment like police cruisers, dump trucks, mowers, fire gear, among other items. We use sinking funds for equipment replacement. That uses the replacement cost of the asset divided by its useful life to arrive at funds to save each year. We put a little bit of money away each year. So when it comes time to buy a dump truck each year, replace a loader, replace police cars, we have money in that sinking fund to purchase the asset. When we trade in vehicles as well, we put that into those sinking funds for replacement. It's important to our overall operations as we need this equipment to provide services. And stretching the useful life of capital equipment items, it's trying to find that fine line. Sometimes we get a little more life out of it, but then we also run into things where it could add added maintenance costs over time. If you have an older piece of equipment that you go more into operating to keep it operational. So the revenue to fund capital, it's funding through a few different streams. There's an annual allocation from the general fund that's transferred in, use of unassigned fund balance, some impact fees. There's a small amount for parks and public works equipment that's funded with those. And we've used some ARPA funds the last few years especially for some one-time projects and to help levy some of this inflation that we've been facing, using it strategically. The focus using the fund balance and ARPA and recommendations I've made in capital budgets in recent years have been primarily these one-time purchases and projects. In FY25 budget that we're currently in, these sources are used to assist with some vehicle purchases, dealing with the rising costs. This is the year we had to replace 2 of our 8 DPW dump trucks with inflation. So we used more ARPA money to help with the extra truck purchase. Also use fund balance historically to offset some of these savings accounts to not have as much we need from the general fund each year. And thinking about this model to have the general fund perhaps cover all those replacement needs for existing equipment annually, creating a sustained funding stream year to year so we know there's adequate funds, not necessarily knowing we won't have an amount of fund balance to use every year towards that vehicle and equipment replacement. It's probably small on the screen, but this is from your capital budget for this year. It just kind of shows that breakdown visually. You'll see that still use some ARPA this year, things like the community center, library space projects in there, some paving at the fire station, some building projects. We use a little bit towards police vehicle. We used a good chunk towards that highway truck replacement because we had to replace the 2 trucks this year, so that helped out there. Also with the fund balance, trying to sprinkle it in different accounts, but like to start moving more if we can away from using fund balance, using it more towards the general fund replace items, thinking about the fund balance to use maybe more towards these larger ticket capital items that we especially have to borrow money for too. So just the numbers here, the general fund allocation being transferred in is just under $370,000 FY25. Just under 170 for fund balance, so total about 536,000 from those 2 funding sources for capital. Operating budget was also decreased for capital items in the revised budget. We reduced $50,000 for police cruisers, decided to purchase 1 to 2 instead of 2 to 3 as trying to trim the budget back for the revote. Compare that to FY24, had about 472,000 from the general fund, about 150,000 from the fund balance. That's about 620,000 in all for capital. The ARPA funds were great to use for some of these larger projects. We had pretty expensive police station door replacement project over a couple of years. It was about $80,000. We used the ARPA money for that. So this opportunity, we had that. We bought a line striper for DPW to do some of our own in-house striping. We used that initial with ARPA. Now we're just saving a few $1,000s a year to replace that. Create that opportunity. We also use it to buy the new radios and turnout gear for the 9 new firefighters in 2022. That was about $160,000 that we used the ARPA money to make that initial capital purchase for that service addition. So to keep on the board's radar, we have some just large dollar amount of capital items in the coming years. You might recall we ordered a new ambulance this year because the build time is 3 years. It's scheduled to be delivered in the fall of 2027. We got our spot in line for the build, but we still need to figure out the debt service for that. It's likely a note for approval in 26 or 27 as we get closer to when the asset's going to be delivered. Fire engine number 2 is due to replacement in 2029, and the engine's had a number of mechanical repairs we've had to keep up with the last few years. Costs for fire engines are now easily exceeding $1 million, and I think the build time is over 3 years or so for that as well. And talking with our chief and deputy chief. So.
And those two are not in our capital fund?
No, the town's historically bonded for the fire and ambulance apparatus. Thinking about if there's a means to start thinking now to putting some more money into capital savings towards some of these larger ticket items, that decreases the amount to bond for and saves money and interest over time. But these are big ticket items, and think about different strategies there to save some money with debt. And also our radio communications equipment and tower. We're doing permitting work on that. That's looking at the old Creamery Road site. A lot of our radio equipment is of early 2000s vintage, repeaters, and items that make public safety radios function. We know this has been something to look at for a few years now, and using funding to work on permitting. Now we have a lease agreement for the site that we've looked at. But that's going to be a rather expensive project too, probably in the neighborhood of $2 to $3 million. Probably the tower itself over $1 million, and then upwards to another $2 million to replace these items over time. So starting to think about those needs that are coming up here in the shorter term, this decade, or about halfway through it. These are coming up. Then obviously the library renovation expansion project as well. Thinking about that and what that cost may be. We're looking at potential capital campaign feasibility, but it's likely going to need some public debt to take on if the board wants to advance that project too. So one thing just to think about is the concept of a separate capital tax levy. Separate the capital needs from the operating needs of the general fund. Instead of raising funds through a single municipal tax rate, create a separate capital tax levy. One town that does this is the town of Essex. I chatted with their manager and finance director. I think they started this in 06 or 07. They had a 2 cents. The voters approved to increase that to 3 cents in 2022. So this is from their website, kind of what town of Essex tax bill looks like. They have the town capital tax rate, which is approved by the voters, and then their general fund rate, that's a bit higher than ours, and some local agreement rates to get their total municipal rate, and then this is their education tax down here. So just theoretically thinking if Williston established a capital tax levy and say it was 3 cents per $100 of assessed value, it'd raise about $660,000 annually. Each cent on our rate raises about $220,000, just under that. Our current municipal tax rate is just over 35.5 cents per $100 of assessed value. So of that current rate, about 1.7 cents of it are used to raise the $368,000 from the general fund that we transfer into the capital fund. Then we're using just under $170,000 this year. It's worth about just over 3/4 of a cent on the rate. We're supplanting it with a fund balance this year. We've used in that neighborhood the last couple of years for that. So just the overall mechanics here, you have a capital and a general fund tax rate. They would be completely separate. The general fund's raised each year. The amount to raise is approved at town meeting on the warning, and the rate is set by the select board after the grand list is finalized. If you were to have a capital tax levy or any separate tax levy, the voters need to approve a formal a reserve fund for that, what it can be used for. And then the voters need to approve the rate to apply initially. That rate can be changed over time, but the voters need to approve the change in the rate. The select board can't change that rate year to year. So as the grand list grows, that rate, that capital rate would grow with it. So the amount of tax revenue it would raise would increase with the grand list, as an example.
Wait, so I lost you there for a second. So what were you saying about couldn't change the rate?
The voters would have to approve a different cent rate. The select board couldn't change that.
Don't they have to approve it every year anyway?
Once they approve a rate, it's set. So the only way they could remove that tax levy is there'd have to be, I think the select board could remove the levy altogether or a referendum to remove it. But if the voters at town meeting approved a 3-cent capital tax levy, that would be something that would occur year to year. And then
Without a revote?
without a revote. It would establish that as a separate capital reserve fund with a rate that is applied to it. You hear things, other examples like other towns have like a penny for paths or a half cent for certain function. Those are approved by voters for these special reserve funds, and then you have cents or half cents on your tax rate that's applied just for that one purpose year to year.
So would, on your previous slide, so would what would show up on the ballot? The 67, 66? Or
Yeah, so
69, 70, 66?
Yeah, so at town, so approve the new rate. Say the town wanted to ask the voters, shall you establish a capital reserve funds and have a rate of 3 cents?
3 cents, yeah, like, I get that, you vote for it once, right?
Yep. So this would essentially be the tax bill will be broken out this way. You'd have that 3 cents every year. Then you would have whatever you need to raise for the general fund. And you wouldn't need to raise what's in there right now for the capital fund. So you could take those cent half off the general fund. Off the top.
So in this situation, or maybe she's our situation, this situation, the voters would vote on the 67, 66, but when they got their tax bill, it would be 3 cents higher than that.
Correct. Yeah, you would just add that 3 cents every year to whatever was set for the general fund.
So just so I'm,
Right, tax bill,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
not
It would just break it out that way. You always approve the bottom line for the general fund, then the rate is set by the select board based on the grand list.
but on this, the capital fund would be set by the tax rate would be set by the voters, and they would just carry forward until the voters changed that.
Yeah.
So they would not, this would not be on the ballot every single year. It would only be on the ballot if it's gonna be changed.
Yep, that's correct.
So if it's currently 1.7 cents going to 3 cents, that would be a 1.3 cent increase to do this.
The net increase would be that, if that was the model that the town went with. Taking a little bit from what's being raised, and then separating out as a separate question, and then applying it as a thought of kind of sustainable capital funding over time.
So the first year, we have to sell it by saying it's a 1.3 cent increase.
Yep, correct.
And then would the budget that the voters approve at town meeting, would that include the capital budget?
It would be, the select board would still approve the capital budget separately. The voters wouldn't approve the capital budget. We would just, as we put our revenue streams together, we would say, okay, we're gonna get $650,000 from the capital tax levy that goes into that. The select board would still approve the capital budget. The voters wouldn't approve the capital budget.
Would it be easier the first year to do 2 cents instead of 3 cents?
If we did it.
Yeah.
Then you have to go to vote again for 3 cents, and we're running some big. It would be a lot easier to sell that way, but then like the next year or 2 years from now, when we end up having to raise it because we have all these other costs, we'd have to go back to the voters to raise it again.
And the reason we're spending more is because we would not be using the fund balance to make up the difference.
Yep, that would be part of it. If you're trying to not use fund balance, because it could fluctuate year to year too, and we know what our replacement for like our equipment is going to be year to year. if there was fund balance the board wanted to then assign, it could be used towards some of these larger projects, maybe replacing a fire truck, maybe ambulance, maybe saving towards a building improvement, putting into accounts for that instead.
I'm just thinking,
Like the idea of not having to potentially bond as much too, you know, so we are, I mean, it won't feel like it initially because it will be a greater output, but, you know, having that interest saved potential too is, you know.
Yeah, that would be an easier sell for my own head to say, well, if we do this, if we raise it 3 cents, and when we have an ambulance, we have a fire truck. The intent is we would not have to bond for those if we raise the tax rate from 1.7 to 3 now, and we start putting that money aside for it.
I think eventually we would have to not bond, but I think we'd have to, it'd be many cycles before we
Well,
could.
you're getting $250,000 more a year.
And part of it is what our department has to work on right now too, is their capital budgets. You know, what's kind of our baseline for the equipment we have today, or what needs to go in those sinking funds? And if we raise at least that through a capital tax levy, then whatever's over that could be applied in other areas, the capital budget, those long-term savings. We've been faced where we need to trim what was going towards some of these savings accounts. Shirley and I kind of juggle the capital budget each year of how much to pull from general fund, how much to recommend pulling from other sources. Creates this kind of sustained revenue stream year to year that can be used for equipment replacements, and also thinking strategically about those other items as well.
And I feel like when we things get on the chopping block, it's so often been our, you know, the money we put towards capital expenses or towards building up towards some of these capital purchases we would need to make. But that's eventually going to catch up to us too, because if, you know we have to replace a vehicle in X amount of years, then we haven't been putting money in there because that's been something we've cut, you know, we still have to spend that money, like eventually. And this would ensure that, you know, we weren't put in that position when we had to cut.
So is the town of Essex the one that has a actual town meeting and votes the budget, or is it the village? One of them does, and I can't remember which one.
It was the village. I don't know if they
The
still
village.
do from the floor, but the town does Australian.
So they do it by Australian ballot.
Yep.
It's so easy by Australian ballot to vote no. So,
Are there other, so we know that Essex is doing this, are there other examples of like comparable sized towns and things like that we know of that we could look at?
Yeah, I've looked a little bit in Chittenden County. I can dig into it more if the board would like. I think Colchester's looking into something with kind of their just public safety-based capital equipment. I think they're looking at some sense on their levy, or they have something established. I'm sure we see it throughout the state in different areas, and I can look at that if the board would like me to.
The schedule of our FY25 capital budget. So thinking back to.
Would you mind coming to the table?
Yeah,
Shirley?
sure. So thinking about Essex, you know how we have these columns that show the funding on here? I'm thinking about Ted's question as well. This may still go before the voters because if we don't raise enough in that capital tax, we're still gonna have something from the general fund, and the town of Essex still has that.
Correct.
And raise enough with that tax to avoid this altogether. I mean, there's still gonna be some funding from the general fund or the fund balance, wherever we get it from. So I think this would still go before the taxpayers as part of the package.
Yeah, just the bottom line of the operating column, whatever that is. If it's, you know, much lower than that, yeah, that's exactly right, Shirley. Essex still needs to raise some through the general fund to transfer into their capital fund. Their finance director and manager told me, you know, they just raised it 3 cents. They're looking at raising it higher in the future. Their rate doesn't raise quite as much as Williston's does based on grantless comparisons. But you know, they're looking at that. They also have different things with, they have a police department that they contract with the city of Essex Junction for, and they have money with that agreement that they then put into police equipment replacements. So a little different with different municipalities.
The other thing we haven't talked about is, we talked about it when the school impact fee goes away, replacing that with maybe a public safety impact fee instead, and then
these two would work together for funding capital or public safety in the town. I know we've talked about that, but.
Yeah, I've talked about it a little bit. That would be another, revenue stream in the toolbox, and I think we're gonna have that back on the agenda here shortly. Fire chief come and talk a little bit more about that.
Cool. Now on the farm, I always like to spend money. I spend. So I think about a fund balance. How do we continue not spending that for capital projects? Is there any way we can have language? I don't know the proper wordage or anything, but a way to add language to the budget that makes it more difficult to use the fund balance for capital projects.
It kind of falls to your general select board policy of having a fund balance between 10 and 20% of the operating budget. So each year the board has to approve this using any fund balance. So that's a good time to have those conversations at the board to say how much money should be used for the fund balance, and we try to project how much would be left modeling it out. But you have the discretion as a select board to make those decisions year to year.
Right, we either decide, are we going to apply it as revenue, or are we going to spend it on something that we need to fund? That's sort of what we have, that discussion at the end of each budget.
Yeah.
So if we spend, say, 20% of the fund balance every year on the capital projects, we should not have to spend any on the capital projects, or less than 20% going forward? Is that something that we track year to year?
Yeah, we've got it in each budget year to year. There's a sheet like this. I'll say some of the needs evolve through the budgeting process too, where it's trying to trim a little bit from the general fund. Okay, maybe use a little more fund balance there. I spent a lot of time on this sheet when putting the draft budget together, just thinking, oh, could we maybe take 5 from here, 5 from here? But ultimately, it's your budget, so I'll present to you a draft to work from. But these are some of the policy decisions you have to make ultimately, how you want these bottom lines and revenue uses to land.
When I think of the capital projects, I think of that as a lot of it is public works, public safety. It's money that people who pay taxes in this town are getting use of it, not something that we're giving to some, I don't know.
Yeah, and that's the vast majority coming from the operating budget. In this column, it's the equipment fund. That's $360,000 towards replacement of equipment each year.
I hear a lot of people tell me we want something for the tax dollar that we spend. To me, capital projects are the most easily identifiable things that we spend our tax dollars on.
Until someone has to make an emergency call and they want the police and the fire to show up. That's, those are pretty tangible too.
Yeah, and the two go hand in hand. Right?
Yeah.
You need the equipment to provide the service.
I think this is an intriguing idea. I'm in my head, and I have more thinking to do on it. I'm kind of separating into two things. One is, what if you were only, I'm not saying this, what if we were only going to start this fund at 1.7 cents? So it would be just a swap. It's going from the operating fund, it's going to go to the capital fund, no impact on taxes from that point of view. And if that was what we were asking, is that the right thing to do? Because we're now taking, I don't know, $400,000 or whatever out of what the voters vote on a budget, right? So they're not really voting on a tax rate anyway, but we're taking it out of what they're looking at each year. And there's lots of people who would say having it all in one pot so that the select board has to make trade-offs is a good thing. That's how we live within our budget, right? It's not, this is in the other pot, you're paying it, this is what we focus on. So there's sort of, I'm going through the pros and cons sort of in my head if it was just 1.7 cents. And then if I get myself over there, everybody agrees that that's the right thing to do because it gives us a nice steady stream, period, whatever. Then the question is, do we go higher than that? And if we're gonna go to 3 cents, can we make a compelling case to the voters that they're going to be paying that much more? Just be upfront about it. We need this much more for our capital fund. This is how we wanna do it, and why. So those would be the two things that I would have to kind of wrap my head around a little bit before I could say yes, but I am thinking with the amount of capital and this whole capital budget, it's complicated and it's hard to keep track of, and we need the money because we have infrastructure that needs to be maintained, and so this does feel like a solid way of doing that. But that's sort of what I'm wrestling at.
Yeah, no, all good points to think about here. You know, I'm bringing this to the board now in September, because if the board decided it wants to ask this question in March, you need to decide that by January. This wouldn't affect the FY26 budget, because we don't want to, you know, take money out of the general fund, try to put it all towards this approach and say it's not supported at town meeting, then you don't have any money. So it would make it effective for FY27. So a year from now, if something was approved at town meeting this coming March, we built the FY27 budget, we would build it using that revenue stream model. So there'll be a lag of a year.
I asked someone from the town of Essex, who's a large taxpayer, about it. He didn't even notice it on his tax bill. So I think the first year is gonna be the most difficult.
And, you know, there's certainly, their general fund tax rate is about double what our general fund tax rate is right now, just different communities, different grand lists.
But I was at my cousin's house in Pennsylvania this weekend, and he has a house similar to Southridge or Brennan Woods. And I asked him what his taxes were, and it was shocking.
Which way? Shockingly high, shockingly low?
He pays $4,500 total for education and municipal. $3,000 for municipal and $1,500 for education.
That's completely flipped from ours.
Yeah. So if the board wants me to continue doing some more research, maybe reach out to other towns, I can continue this discussion with you as you work through the, you know, your town meeting warning or the next several months. Just want to introduce it to you tonight and see if you had thoughts on continued dialogue.
Yeah.
And just one thing you said, just, I think the Conservation Committee or they did bring up, or maybe they're still considering, like, requesting that we do a penny for lands kind of thing, which would be a similar. I was always under the assumption that would be on the ballot every year, and people would either vote it up or down for the, but, so what you're saying is that if the norm would be that they would not have to, that if that was approved, they don't keep coming back?
Yeah, my understanding is once it's established, those rates, they're for the town until the voters vote to change it. And when I was in Milton, the town, that was about 10 years ago, the town had 3 different half cents, and I know the voters had approved those. I think the authority rests with the select board to remove that. I'd have to double check with the town attorney.
Couldn't-
It's been a little bit.
Couldn't it be on the ballot that, you know, it's only for 1 year?
I think so. I'd have to check with our attorney, but just
Yeah.
see what your options are. And certainly, I want to just confirm, you know, what my understanding is, talking to the other towns too, just hearing from our council on the mechanics here.
Or maybe that funding could be rolled into the capital fund.
One of the concerns I have with things like that is that it doesn't take into account the entire balance of the budget.
Right.
And, you know, it's a wonderful thing to say, you know, well, shouldn't we, you want to spend this much for this wonderful project? And who wouldn't? You know, but then there are all these other things that money is going to be taken away from, or that tax capability is going to be used up for that,
Well,
but not for
exactly what we're
other
talking about with this new tax levy.
It is, but
Yeah,
that.
all the
but
same pot of money that people are
Sure,
paying.
but I think the capital budget is very different than a specific thing for
I
one.
don't know if people would agree with that.
That's my thought.
Yes.
But I don't, you know, because otherwise we could say, well, how about a penny for playgrounds or a penny for.
People do, right?
I-
Parks,
Yeah, I
right?
think it's a bad idea.
Right. Well.
I think it's like, you know, California with its Proposition 13 in the 1970s, where everybody, yeah, we're going to cut property taxes by 50%. Oh, that's great. Bang, they did it. And then the chaos happens. Or was it Oklahoma or Kansas that had the supply side economics governor who cut taxes, you know, incredibly, because what a great idea. But then, nothing balances anymore. I mean, when you start segregating out one specific part of policy versus another specific part of policy, one specific part of the budget versus the entire budget, I think it leads to problems. And I don't see that exactly here with the capital budget tax rate, because capital is such a significant part of the overall budget anyway. But it's something to think about.
And also, Williston traditionally has had just one rate, with those conversations year to year. The fund, then okay, what's the trim back? So it's a big policy level decision for the select board to think about.
The Conservation Fund actually was started by a special article on the ballot years ago.
Right, that's right. Yeah. I know there's some talk with the statewide discussion about education funding, is that one of the things people are pointing to is that the education fund is now a separate fund from the general fund, and there's some thoughts about trying to get them better connected, because the general fund has to be approved by the legislature. And so if you connect those, there's a little more pressure to not say yes. So there is that, the capital fund separately from our operating fund. We're gonna spend our time on the operating fund. And so there's not that pressure to control your capital fund. So those are the pros and cons.
Is that,
That's all I had on
Okay.
that topic for tonight.
if people are willing, we could go on to the next agenda item. So, that would be the unspent ambulance bond proceeds resolution.
Want me to go ahead and?
Yeah, you can take that one, Shirley.
This is a simple one. This is $1,200 that's sitting in the fiduciary account. So when a bond is closed, all the funds go into a bank account with a trustee, and then we have to request reimbursement. So this is the ambulance, everything's paid in full, and our only option is to let it sit there and repurpose it, but it's too small, or use it against a principal payment. So I'm just recommending we use it against the November principal payment and reduce our payment by about $1,200 or whatever the balance is at that point. Get rid of one teeny tiny account.
Yeah. Hey,
So I'll move to adopt the resolution to apply remaining bond proceeds from the 2023 ambulance purchase to the next principal debt payment as presented.
second.
Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Nays, the ayes have it.
Thank you.
Got to print it out, I sent it down. I'll get it to you tonight or in the future.
So that brings us to manager's report.
So I'll add a few things to my written reports. Good news, we received a $180,000 grant from V-Trans to complete missing sidewalk connection on Industrial Avenue.
Oh, great, excellent.
We've got one we received a couple years ago that will connect from Route 2 about midway on Industrial. This new grant will connect it all the way up to Route 2A. So you'll be able to go from Route 2A to Route 2 on Industrial Avenue.
Except for the bridge.
Does that, that's what I was gonna
That'll get a
say,
bridge.
does it include the bridge?
We replaced that. But it's great work by our public works staff, and it took a couple tries to get these grants. They do a really good job. And, it's a big segment to connect our community, so keep an eye on that in the years to come. We may need an earlier start time at the next meeting as well. Just check and see if 6:30 was available for the board. And if not, we can do an executive session later too. So.
October 1st,
The first of October.
okay with me.
Works for me.
Yep.
Works for me.
Yeah, it's hard. Tuesday is like our huge night of all the things happening simultaneously for our family. But yeah, I can.
6:45.
Yeah, if 6:45 we could do, that would be easier. But I can probably. I mean, tonight I can probably make it.
I can, as things get closer in planning, I can follow up. And
Okay.
maybe an executive session. We can set the agenda accordingly. Thank you. Also want to mention publicly, it's our last meeting for a longtime recurring secretary, Marianne Reardon, doing the minutes for the select board, taking the minutes and producing them. She's been providing the service for over 14 years. She was on the select board in the late 80s. She informed me recently as well. So a big thanks to her for all her work. She'll be wrapping up that work. And able to find someone to step in starting on the October meeting who is currently doing minutes for the town of Essex and the town of Shelburne and I think a couple others. So, it's great to find someone to carry on Mary Ann's work.
Someone who loves municipal meetings.
Yeah. Well, and thank Mary Ann on our behalf, truly.
Yeah,
She's
she's
done
a great job.
an amazing job.
I think we should do a resolution
I
for
think,
her.
yeah, a
Yeah.
resolution.
I'll allow that to the next
And this,
agenda.
this discussion should probably be reflected prominently in the minutes.
I was hoping it would. I put a note in my manager's report.
That's kind of a directive.
And I've started outreach for our November bond vote on the parking lot. All ballots will be mailed by the Secretary of State's office and should be received by October 1st. So I want to get in front of that. So I did some outreach last week. My message will be in the Observer this week. Looking to film a television program on it next week to get that out there. So folks will start getting their ballots, so I'll make sure they're informed about the project before they cast their vote.
Did you get any feedback? You put, it was in your manager's letter, right, that went out to the town?
Yeah, I did it on the listserv too. There's a couple questions asking about lighting. Yeah, it's just one or two so far, so hope we get a few more. Oh, yeah, did you print it? Thanks.
Resolution.
Then one other thing, there's a group of city and town managers that we've had on a couple calls. It started by the city of Montpelier and facilitating these conversations. It's a call on all three branches of state government to do more to address the human services needs for the unhoused population in the state. There's been a press release put together. They're going to have a press conference tomorrow in Montpelier with a number of managers attending. I've reviewed it. I didn't want to sign off just before running it by the select board. Some of the main points that is being advocated for is for the state to take an active role in the siting, creation, and operation of more temporary and permanent shelter space, immediate changes to judicial and prosecutorial approach for individuals who are compromising public safety with their behavior, right size and manage the general assistance programs that motel, hotel owners are not controlling emergency housing policies, not dictating where unhoused folks are housed, and provide immediate operating capital to nonprofit organizations and municipalities serving the homeless population. These are some of the points from the press release that's going out, and there's also some longer term speaking about just the need for housing in the state overall. So sort of a number of my colleagues and some mayors as well have signed on to it. Want to run that by the select board because it certainly represents Williston as well if I add my name to it.
Sounds
Don't
good.
have any
Doesn't
problem
sound,
with
I think it makes sense. I
Yeah.
think we are in a housing crisis.
yeah, I agree.
Thank you all. I'll add my name to it. I don't know if I'll attend the press event or not. So I'll have Williston's name on.
Doesn't sound terribly controversial. It's all
No.
kind of just common sense.
Thank you.
Well,
Eric, to go along with that, have you mentioned the filming or the showing of the just getting by?
Yep. I shared that with the board last manager's report. There's a link to get some free tickets as well. I put that in my message this week, and Melinda told me it got some good buzz from our people signing up for space there. So I think there's 100 seats. If we exceed that, we might be able to move into a bigger theater that evening too. That should be a good event. That's all I have for the manager's report.
Okay. Other business?
One catering permit, it's a 802 cocktails for a wedding at Isham Family Barn. It's September 22nd is the date. Staff has no objection to this application.
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, it is approved.
One abstain?
One abstention.
Then one other piece of other business, the annual meetings for VLCT, PASIF, and VERB are coming up next week, and the town must select a delegate to vote on its behalf at these annual meetings. I serve on the PASIF board. I've done this the last few years. Should the board wish to appoint me as Wilson's delegate, there's a motion to
Move to appoint town manager Eric Wells as Williston's delegate to the VLCT, PASIF, and VERB annual meetings on October 2nd, 2024.
Is there a second?
second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
The ayes have it.
That's all I have.
Brings us to final thoughts on items from this meeting.
I was, right after, I missed asking the question, but maybe it didn't need to be asked, but how are we to ensure that the ARPA funds that are going to the Burlington Beer Company are being used for that specific purpose?
Yep, a good question. We spell it all out in our agreement. I believe we need receipts, the accounting for all this as it flows through for the grant funds that go to them. So I know the terms of the agreement, it will make sure it's used for that purpose.
Thank you.
So like to complete that answer, we will need copies of all the invoices because I'll be submitting for reimbursement, not Burlington Beer Company, because the grant flows through us. So the reimbursement will come through us. So we'll be looking at all of those invoices.
Yeah, and ensuring that they come in a timely manner.
Well, I hope so. We'll have Eric give them a push.
Yeah, they don't want that.
So final thoughts, usually, I kind of put this on the agenda because we had a couple of speakers at the beginning.
Yeah.
If you're going that direction, I'll let you.
Sure, go ahead.
So, I didn't know if we wanted to take up the F-35 resolution.
I don't feel it's necessary.
I think we all saw it, didn't we? We got it on email. I would like certainly the staff to take a look at all of the whereases, because I'm not sure that they're correct. And I would have a few things to add to it if we actually take it up, so.
One of the things we haven't talked about or seen in a while is, we have the noise monitoring kind of things, here in town that have been placed. And as a board, we haven't really taken a look at, what that is, the log of that and what the impact has been on the town. So I think, if we're going to consider something like that, I think it would be helpful to have that data in front of us too.
Yeah, that's great. I didn't even think of that. Didn't know about that.
Yep.
I can get a report from that, I'm sure.
Yeah, that'd be great.
What about the two-cycle
Wait,
ban on?
let's just finish this one. So we decide we're taking it up after we get the data? Is that-
I hadn't heard that.
I know, that's what I was wondering, yeah. Are we gonna look at the data and then decide if we want to take it up?
Shouldn't that go to committee or commission?
Who would it go to?
Sorry.
Shouldn't that issue go to one of our committees or commissions?
For the F-35 question.
Which committee or commission?
About, this is the two-cycle.
Oh,
Oh,
I'm
well,
sorry.
yeah. Oh, we're still on the
Still on
F-35.
Still- I called us back. I'm with you on that second one, but the first
Yeah.
one. So did we, so were you thinking, Greta, we look at the data and then decide if we
Yeah, I think,
need to take any further
yes, I
action?
think it would behoove us to look at the data for all of us to maybe re-look at the resolution from Burlington, and then, discuss it further.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would like to discuss it further. I don't know what my ultimate position would be, but
Yeah.
I do get very concerned about the town, staying with what the town can actually do. And I'm always concerned about resolutions that, I don't know how effective they are. And I don't know that we have the expertise to make recommendations. And something like this, again, I'm just voicing ideas here. I don't know what my position would be, but it is always interesting to me that if a resolution is calling on us to contact the congressional delegation that will then contact the Air Force, it's a federal bureaucratic game of telephone, and it's almost symbolic. I don't know. Anyway. But.
Well, we have a packed work plan, especially between now and budget, so if this is really going to get very convoluted, I would probably not prioritize it, but I don't really know. Terry's obviously looked at it pretty hard, so maybe we just have the discussion about the data first and then decide if we want to go
Okay.
further.
Yeah, one step at a time.
Yeah.
Okay. And the two-cycle.
Feels like an
Lower.
energy committee thing
I was
to me, to,
Energy or conservation?
Yeah.
I guess it's energy?
yeah.
I think
I mean,
we'd
I
have
think
to-
first and foremost, the issue is kind of the pollutants and the environmental impacts, and so for them to explore that issue on our behalf.
The other thing that came up about the 4 feet of distance between cars and bikes, though, I don't know how we can do better at enforcing that, but I do think that's a significant issue.
And I chatted with our police lieutenant and chief about that, with that legislation came out at the end of last session. Typically, law enforcement agencies receive kind of guidance on enforcement of new legislation. They haven't received that guidance yet. They're keeping an eye out for it, but yeah, that enforcement mechanism is certainly can be challenging. I know we have directed patrols on Mountain View Road quite a bit. I also know there's some signage that was shared with me about that, and I've talked to Bruce a little bit about that. Maybe we can put some more signage out in certain locations around town. But I just know from the law enforcement end, they're waiting for some more guidance on that legislation of what that looks like on their end.
Asking our police force and the court system to spend time on that.
Yeah, well,
I think we have more important things to.
Well, until somebody gets killed, and then.
If a if a cruiser it sees it, I would hope that
Yeah.
the officer would do something about it.
Right.
The signs that I think they can't hurt.
Correct.
But, I was on 89 today, and, I was watching somebody coasting along in the passing lane right past the sign that says keep right except to pass. Which I always get my parochial Vermonter attitude on, saying, it's the Flatlanders. They drive like they're from New York. And I say that, and my wife, and she does not enjoy it when I say that, because she's from New York.
I find that when I drive my little convertible out in the country, it's just attracts every idiot. Most of them are Vermonters.
Well, I
Yeah.
would say the cycling thing, I don't really see that as a select board action, except to, sort of direct the town manager to talk to the police department about it and keep it on his radar. I don't think that's really our
I
job.
think that makes sense. Eric, do you need a formal motion from us?
I'll check in with them and just see when they get that guidance and just talk about enforcement operations.
Okay.
Maybe a few more signs.
Does that cover it? Because there is an executive session that we need to.
Can you remind me what the timing on maybe this is for next meeting, but I've just kind of lost track of what the timing would be if we're trying to aim on the library, if we're looking at a March bond, what the steps, what are the deadlines?
If you wanted to ask the question at town meeting day in March, you would need to have that warned in January. So part of lining up, getting the estimate by the end of this calendar year is to align if the board chose that timeline.
Right.
As we think about, capital campaign feasibility study, we won't have that done until after town meeting day next spring. The bulk of that will be in January to February probably. But there's different options to that we can go through in thinking about bonding authority, and then backfilling it with capital contributions before you go to bond sale as well.
True.
Town of Middlebury did that approach for their library. I think they got $15 million approved for a bond for the library, and they're trying to raise maybe upwards of 8 to 10 of that, and then go to bond sale for what's remaining.
That'd be a tough sell. I think most people would assume that if you got the bond approved, the fundraising would go right off the cliff, but, okay, so I guess I would just ask if we could at some point see the steps that, I think the design is interesting. It doesn't seem fleshed out enough for us to be thinking about a town meeting day bond.
Yeah, the goal would be by November, early December, to really have the design finalized and have a really good construction estimate.
Okay.
As part of that, to give you that time to make a decision if you wanted to think about a March vote, if you wanted to wait, even call a special meeting was something someone
True.
suggested to me,
Like a May meeting or
our
something.
consultant in the fall next year too. We have a lot of options to think about. I'll kind of outline all those for your next discussion as well, because it's that decision point time coming up if you want, what the trajectory would be for that project with the funding piece of it.
Great, thank you.
For a large capital bond vote like that, would that be over 15 years?
Yeah, most likely. Yeah, we would look at different, you want to do at least the life of the improvement, and that, would be over 15. We'd probably look in the 20 to 30 range. Depends on the rates a little bit. I looked at some different rate options besides the bond bank. There's some through USDA that have a fixed rate that you'll know up front what the interest rate is gonna be. With the bond bank, we don't know the rate until they go to the bond sale. There might be ways to stack the debt too, with some towards, some with the bond bank, some maybe from a lender. Maybe you can blend the interest rates and you have different maturity terms for the different amounts you borrow. So I'm thinking of like it's gonna have a kind of a debt stack here that makes the most sense fiscally for the town, and things we'll have to think through.
And you're talking about the library expansion project, right?
Yep.
And so, $10 million bond would be for 15 years would be how much per million?
I would want to say it just off the cuff here, but we can run some numbers though, to give you a better idea. And part of it, the interest will be significant on that too, in the first part of the bond. But I can get you some better numbers. I just want to calculate them out a little bit more.
The sidewalk bond is finishing up though too, right? So it could be,
Yeah, the sidewalk and the public safety building bonds are starting to mature, I think, after the FY26 payments. The public safety building bonds were in 3 series, so there's a big chunk maturing in FY26, then some in 27 and 28. But I think the debt capacity between all of those, surely in the.
I was gonna say, I was looking at what matures after 26, what drops off, and I thought it was like 420,000 when I looked at it, don't quote me.
So,
It's a
yeah.
big, pretty significant number.
So part of that, part of that theory is you're replacing old debt with new debt, and it won't be a 1-for-1 swap, but there'll be some advantage to that.
Yeah, it'd be interesting.
You know, another thing you can do, depending on bond proceeds and how that flow out to the contractor, you can ladder some investments in there in the bond fund to raise some interest. That would then be used to pay the bonds or pay expenses as well, depending on, how long we're paying the contractor.
So I'm sure that certainly be a question when that bond question comes up, is how much is it going to cost in taxes and
Sure.
right.
for people. So.
And the construction, can't think of the right word here all of a sudden, and the construction, at the school over that period of time, how long it takes to do it.
Oh, on the library site?
Yes, how much it disrupts the bus, the car traffic,
Yeah.
dropping kids
All
off.
things we discuss heavily with the school district, and our intention would be the library would stay open during construction too. There'd be a plan to keep that operating, but yeah, certainly with that amount of activity, there'd be a lot of logistics to work out, and maybe some of the heavier things construction-wise in the summertime as well, trying to figure out what makes most sense, everything going on.
We do need a executive session, so if that takes care of circling back around, there is a proposed motion.
I'll move to find that premature public knowledge regarding a labor relations agreement with employees would clearly place the town at a substantial disadvantage, and further move that we enter executive session to discuss a labor relations agreement with employees under Title I, Sections 313A1B of the Vermont statutes, and invite town manager Eric Wells to join.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
So we are in executive session, and we will not be going back into public session after that. So that's it for tonight.